Dante Perez Jones, Tory Medley, Tasia Fortune, Javion Magee, Demetrius Fleming. Do you know who these people are? Do you know their stories? What if I told you that these people have something deeply disturbing in common? That their deaths occurred under circumstances that, in many cases, bear striking similarities. All black men and women, all hanging in public places, almost all of them ruled a suicide. So here's the question, and it's not simply how did they die, but did we ever ask enough questions about how they died? This is from Dirt We Grow. I am Stephanie Allen. Today is a follow up episode, part two of a story that I did back in January earlier this year, 2026, called Black Men Hanging Across America. Where's the media coverage? 8 months later, unfortunately, the list of these suspicious circumstances continues to grow longer. And before we begin, I just want to be clear, I'm not here to investigate further or try to find facts that have not been established already, that we don't know about these cases already. And I'm certainly not here to sensationalize tragedy for clickbait. The purpose is to ask the questions, bring awareness to these stories that, in far too many cases, receive little to no meaningful media attention, and say their names. Because when these stories aren't talked about, when the questions aren't being asked, when families are left searching for answers in silence, something dangerous can happen. Abnormalities get normalized. And I, for one, refuse to allow that to continue. These stories deserve to be heard. These families deserve to be heard and deserve real answers. Each one of these cases deserves a real investigation and real justice. So my hope with this episode is to ignite the conversations that we are far too uncomfortable to have. If we remain silent, we risk becoming comfortable with something that we should never ever have been comfortable with in the first place. Pretending a problem doesn't exist or ignoring it in hopes that it won't doesn't make it any less real. It only makes it easier to ignore. So let's look at what we actually know.
Radio to Unit 718, 22 Bravo. 10-4, go ahead.
Kyle Bazinga, a Georgia State University student who disappeared in February 2026. And 4 days later, he was found hanging from a tree in Fair Oaks Park, Marietta, Georgia. Authorities say surveillance footage showed Bazinga entering the wooded area alone, and investigators found no evidence of foul play. Let's keep going. Juliana Amba Nzita, Charlotte, North Carolina, May 2026. She was only 16 years old. She too had disappeared in late April. 10 days later, her body was discovered on church property. Her death was automatically classified as suicide, but questions were raised about the investigation. Among those questions were whether a full autopsy had been conducted. What happened to her cell phone? Were the witnesses ever interviewed? And how did investigators reach their conclusion? All still questions unanswered. Tanea Nicole Miller, 27 years old, a woman from Michigan who was visiting Miami around June 18th, 2026. Her family says she was found hanging from a tree at Gwen Cherry Park. Authorities characterized the death as consistent with suicide and reported no evidence of foul play. Her sister disagrees with that conclusion and has called for a full investigation. Still questions unanswered. What did authorities conclude and what evidence led them there? Justice Kai James, a 21-year-old that was at Turner Job Corps Center in Albany, Georgia. His family reports that he returned to pursue another trade certification after already completing his first program, and they described him as a young man who had plans. But on June 21st, he was found hanging outside the facility cafeteria. Now, his family says that officials told him that surveillance footage existed, but didn't get answers about what that footage showed. They questioned how the investigation was handled and why students, not staff, were reportedly the ones who discovered him. His death was ultimately ruled a suicide, but again, there's still questions. If there is surveillance footage, why doesn't the family deserve to know exactly what it shows? Gerard Jackson was 28 years old. He was attending the Electric Forest Festival in Michigan. He left the festival and soon was reported missing. His phone and belongings were recovered, his vehicle located, and eventually his body discovered in a wooded area. Police said the evidence points towards suicide and that they found no indication of foul play. Still, family members had questions. Now, let's just pause right here, real quick, to break down this terminology they keep using. Again, no evidence of foul play. That phrase does not necessarily mean investigators have proven suicide. Those are two different conclusions. The first one says that we didn't find any evidence that someone else did it. The other one says that we have established that the person did it themselves. Not the same thing. There should be investigative work until there is evidence one way or the other. No evidence of foul play does not mean evidence of suicide. Yet almost every case says we didn't find evidence, not we found evidence that they did it themselves. Still ruled a suicide. Tasia Fortune in Mississippi. She was 29 years old and a mother to 4 kids. On August 3rd, her body was found hanging from a tree behind a vacant home in Jackson. Her body was sent to Mississippi State Medical Examiner, and her mother publicly rejected the idea that Tasia had taken her own life, but still no answers. Now let's take a minute and look at Mississippi's history. It is one of the darkest histories of racial terror in the United States. So last year, when Trey was found hanging from a tree at Delta State University in 2025, that history became part of the conversation again. According to reporting by the Marshall Project, he was not the first. At least 9 Black men found hanging from trees in Mississippi alone since 2000. And those are just the documented cases. In Raleigh, North Carolina, August 15th, 32-year-old Black man was found hanging from a tree in downtown Raleigh. Police investigated the death as a suicide. According to authorities, surveillance showed the man approaching the tree alone. Investigators said they found no evidence that another person was involved, so yet again ruled suicide. August 21st, in Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina, 38-year-old Demetrius Fleming was found hanging. The police did not immediately call it suicide because police chief described the case as an open, equivocal death investigation. Investigators specifically said that they weren't assuming suicide or homicide, but they were pursuing all leads. Now, that's a little bit different than any of the other ones. Police chief also acknowledged something else. He said authorities understood the implications surrounding the death of a black man by hanging. That's the kind of truth that every one of these cases deserve to be looked at with. Not a predetermined answer, not an assumption, an actual investigation. Now, there's one more name that has not been documented or verified as a hanging, but still worth mentioning, is Soraya Henderson, 29-year-old, mother of two, Florida woman, died in July. Her name has been circulating online in connection with claims that she was found hanging in Florida behind a Dollar Tree store. I'm going to tell you what I don't know. I have not found sufficient documentation that has confirmed these specific claims. So I'm not going to present this story as fact, but Soraya's name is staying on the list in the unverified column. These are the facts. I know it's not much. We owe these people more than a headline, more than a conclusion nobody bothered to explain, because history has taught us something. The most dangerous thing we can do is become so accustomed to something that we stop questioning. So remember the names, talk about the stories, ask the questions, and don't ever let silence write the final chapter. And as always, until next time, keep asking questions, keep seeking truth, keep growing through the dirt, and remember that even in the darkest places, hope can take root. See you next week on From Dirt We Grow.